Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we're excited to share a recent webinar we decided to convert into a podcast. This conversation features current Executive MBA students discussing the elective period or the second year of the Executive MBA program. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's a conversation with current Executive MBA students reflecting upon the second year or the elective period of the Executive MBA program. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brett Twitty. I'm the Managing Director of Admissions for the Professional Degree Programs here at the Darden School of Business. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar all about the second year of our Executive MBA program. We're joined by three of our current second year students from the Executive MBA class of 2025. You'll hear from them just a little bit later, but just wanted to give us a little context for our conversation here today. Just a little bit about the structure and design of our Executive MBA program so you kind of can orient to where we are in the experience. It's a 21-month program, start to finish. We have two formats within our Executive MBA program. We have what's called our MBA format and our GEMBA or Global Executive MBA format. There are touch points in Charlottesville, as you will likely hear. There's a week at the beginning of the program and a week at the very end of the program. But the base location for this program is the Washington, D.C. metro area. We're located in Roslyn, Sands Family Grounds, which is where we have our weekend residencies. And this is a cohort-based program, meaning all students start and end together, and they earn the exact same degree as our full-time MBA and part-time MBA students. We have four formats of one MBA. Now, you might look at this a little bit here and kind of think cohort-based, kind of lockstep. Everybody's on the exact same schedule, right? Well, in the second year, as we'll talk about here, there's a lot of flexibility that actually comes in for the Executive MBA students in terms of when their distance classes might be. This is a hybrid program, as you see here. It's about 2/3 in person, 1/3 online. So that online component in the elective period, the second year of the program, can shift around depending upon the courses that you choose. And even within the once-a-month weekend residency, students can have very different schedules depending upon the electives that they choose. And that's something we're really going to dig into this evening. So a little bit more detail, just to kind of help you sort of orient the program. Some of these things I'll repeat more than once here, just to kind of make sure it kind of sticks a little bit, because there's a lot of details flying around. So if you kind of visualize the program, first thing you do as an Executive MBA student is a week-long residency in Charlottesville, and the last thing you do is a week-long residency in Charlottesville. In between, you have basically 20 months. You have weekend residencies that take place on average 1 weekend per month. So 20 weekend residencies over the course of the 21 months of the program. And you should expect to have online class a couple nights per week, most weeks. In the first year of the program, when you're doing the core curriculum, those online classes are Tuesday and Thursday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then when you get to the elective period, the period that we're going to talk about this today, the second year of the program, the timing of those distance classes can vary depending upon the courses that you choose. And then I mentioned that we had two formats within our Executive MBA program. We have an MBA format and a GEMBA format. And you can see here the difference between the two. MBA format students are required to participate in 1 week-long global residency. This is a week-long course where you travel to another country with about 20 to 30 or so classmates. You go and visit businesses, meet with business leaders there. There's no project or deliverable necessarily associated with this. It's about sort of exploring businesses. You may have a paper ultimately to write up at the end of it, but you're not working on a business project. You're going and kind of getting a feel for what business looks and feels like in the country and in those locations. You're typically spending time in two cities. And I think we may have some students who would be happy to talk about their global residency experience as well on this session. GEMBA format students, this is the most global version of the Darden MBA. Students participate in 4 of these week-long global residencies. And we announce the global residencies for each incoming class. They vary from class to class. We announce the locations in July prior to the start of school. Students have an opportunity to preference where they would like to go, and they find out their global residency assignments during that first week when they're in Charlottesville. So always an exciting time in the program. I think most students would tell you if you go on one of these global courses, you want to do more than one. You want to go on 2 or 3 or even 4, work your way up to the GEMBA designation. So a little bit more detail here. So you're going to move through the program in 10 2-month quarters. So every couple of months, you're going to get new classes. In the Executive MBA program, and this is how students are able to finish in 21 months. It's excuse me, they finish essentially the way they're able to finish in 21 months is they're taking three courses at a time. So you'll see in the next couple slides a graphic to kind of help you orient to the first year and the second year. The core curriculum is really in the first year of the program. The second year is electives, and in this program, students take 12 electives, and you have an opportunity to earn what are called focus areas. Now, it's worth noting, Darden is a general management program. No one's going to come to you at any point during the elective period and say, well, what's your focus area? What you have to choose a focus area. That's not how it works here. Students have the freedom to kind of pursue whatever electives they like. If you ultimately are interested in the focus area, it's there. To earn a focus area, you have to take three classes that fall within that focus area. It doesn't show up on your transcript, so it's not like a major necessarily, but it is something that you could put on your resume or on your LinkedIn profile. And I think a lot of times students will pursue these as a way of kind of help building a case for themselves if they're looking to make a career pivot or a career switch. And we have 7 focus areas. They range from entrepreneurship to data analytics and technology, strategy, leadership. There's a wide variety of things, and kind of reflect the wide variety of electives that are available to students. So this is a graphic to kind of help you orient towards the structure of the program and just kind of reiterate some of those things that we shared. Right, we've got these week-long residencies, what are called leadership residencies, leadership residency 1, leadership residency 2, that take place in Charlottesville. And you can see here you have these 2-month quarters, quarter 1, quarter 2. Quarter 3, et cetera. This is the first year of the program in teal, where you're doing core curriculum, the same core that students do across all of our programs. And then you can see a couple things here that's worth noting. You have what's called the professional advancement course. It takes place in the January term, a short 10-day term between the fall and spring semester. This course is largely a virtual course, but there is an opportunity at the very end of the course on Saturday to come in person for what's effectively kind of a career summit. And this course is actually dual enrollment, executive MBA and part-time MBA. You have the option of taking this course in your first or second year, although I will say the vast majority of students will take it in the first year of their program. We talked a little bit about the global residencies, and they occur during these defined travel periods. So this one's about 6 months into the program. The second one's about 10 months into the program. The third one's about 14 months in the program. And this fourth and final one is about 18 months in the program. If you're connected with some of our second year students, you may have seen all kinds of great pictures from their ongoing global residencies. And we also have some first year students who are traveling now as well. We have a group of students that just got back from Vietnam. We have a group of students that's currently in India. We have a group of students that's in South Africa. So it's an exciting time. And then I mentioned the second year of the program is electives, and you can see here 3 electives per 2-month quarter here. So you get to the 12 electives. And one thing to take note of here, as we look at the GIMBA format, is that every global residency beyond the one required global residency effectively can count as an elective, even though it's required for a student who wants to earn that GIMBA designation, those 4 global residencies. But every additional global residency can ultimately lighten your elective load in the elective quarters. So you can see here, this student has the option of just doing 2 electives here in Q7, Q9, Q10. That's kind of how they decided to manage their schedule, because again, the 3 additional global residencies take up those credits. But of course, they could choose to do an overload, which is something that you see students do, where they end up taking more than the 60 credits required for graduation. And that, if that's something that you wanted to do, you could have that conversation with the program team. So just a couple other things, just to give you some context for what we're talking about here. So I mentioned flexibility in this portion of the program. And so there's kind of 2 distinct phases in the executive MBA program. You have the first year where you're doing core curriculum. Everybody's taking the same classes and moving through the program together, same schedule, all of that. First year is very much lockstep in that way. Then you get to the second year, and I mentioned the distance classes can vary, the timing of those can vary depending upon the electives you choose, and also the weekend residency schedule can vary depending upon the electives that you choose. And you can see here, this is an example of an elective quarter and a weekend residency. Weekend residencies are Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They typically will start around noon with class delivery, and then wrap up Sunday around 3 p.m. If this was a core weekend, you would expect to have class on all of these days. But because of the way the electives are structured, you can see here there's some electives that are offered only on Fridays, right? So they only meet on Fridays for this in-person portion. There's some electives that meet on Saturday and Sunday morning, and there's some electives that meet on Saturday and Sunday afternoon. So within a weekend residency, depending upon where people are in terms of working towards their credits, you may run into a classmate who only has class here in this elective quarter on this Friday. Because they're really maybe taking one class that meets on this sort of in-person hybrid schedule, maybe do an independent study perhaps, or they are doing an asynchronous elective, or they may just be taking one elective in that quarter. And then you may meet other students who just have class on Saturday and Sunday because those are the classes that they've chosen. They're taking two electives and then maybe doing an independent study or an asynchronous elective. Those options have become more popular with students because, as you might imagine, independent study that's going to fit into your schedule pretty easily. So asynchronous elective as well, and we've seen increased interest in those as we've started to build out more and more. And this is the example of the distance schedule. Now, I mentioned during the core, you have distance classes you can expect on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, most weeks. Now, you would not have distance class leading up to a weekend residency. So if you kind of imagine what's an average month like as an executive MBA student during the core, or really kind of any time you're taking sort of kind of three classes together, you would expect to have about 6 distance sessions and a weekend residency. Because if you kind of think about that, an average month has 4 weeks. Weekend residency would be on one of those weekends. You would have no distance class leading up to that weekend residency, and you would expect to have distance class during the other weeks. So 2 sessions per week, easy math, 3 times 2, 6 distance sessions. But you can see here, this is a sample of the distance schedule. You can see there's one elective that meets on Monday nights. There's 3 electives that meet on Tuesday nights. 3 electives that meet on Wednesday nights, and another set of electives that meet on Thursday nights. What does this mean for you in terms of scheduling? Well, you have more flexibility here in the elective period, right? If your schedule is such and you want to have, Wednesday and Thursday night distance classes that works better for you, you could choose that. It would narrow the set of electives that you could consider, but you have a little bit more control over your schedule, both in the weekend residencies as well as in these distance classes. And I like to share this with folks just to give you some context that again, I think when we describe the executive MBA program and say 21 months start to finish, you start in with the same group of people. Some of the flexibility that's inherent in the design of the program that has increased over the past couple of years in particular maybe gets lost in that conversation. So as we talk today with our second year students, one thing I want you to think about is kind of 2 phases of the executive MBA program and why we've offered these webinars. One about the first year and one about the second year, is that you're kind of the first year has a distinct kind of feel and structure to it, and the second year has a different feel and structure to it because of the flexibility and the fact that students can have very different schedules in the second year. So with that, I'll get out of the way here, and maybe we'll talk to some of our panelists. But just wanted to give you some context for the conversation. So we are joined by 3 of our second year students in our executive MBA class of 2025. These folks are at quarter 10, which, if you remember from what we just talked about, that is the very last quarter before they have the second leadership residency down in Charlottesville. And then after that, graduation. So at the very end of their program. So they've been almost through the full thing. So I can think of no better group to talk about our topic tonight with than these guys. So want to just do some introductions. So just to give a little bit of context for our conversation. So Gabby, can I come to you first and tell us a little bit more about you and your background?
Of course. It's my pleasure. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Gabby Carter. I am a active duty supply officer in the Navy, currently stationed at Naval Reactors over in the Washington Navy Yard. In my second year, getting ready to move on, I'm staying active duty. So joined the program partially because the Navy is a huge proponent of education, and I actually had a supervisor who went through the Darden program and spoke wonderful things about it. And so that's actually what initially brought me to Darden specifically. But I, definitely stayed for the hybrid setup where you get to work with and meet the cohort every week, 1 weekend out of the month, and then still take the online classes and stuff. So I really appreciated the flexibility and have had a great time so far.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. All right, Sean, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, definitely. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Weber. I live up in the Philadelphia area. I currently work in a product management and data analytics role for Capital One. I'm actually been a career switcher, so just recently switched. I worked at JP Morgan Chase previously. The experience for Darden has been really good so far. I really enjoyed, kind of to echo, like the benefit of both getting the in-person and kind of virtual experience has been helpful, and it's been done in a way that fits and supports my schedule. And yeah, I'm like, I have mixed emotions. I'm excited to be done, but also I'm like definitely going to miss the cohort and the time here as we're coming to the end of our time in the program.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Congratulations on the new job. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Thanks, Brett.
And just in case you're curious about our typical executive MBA class, about 120 or so students per matriculated executive MBA class. About two-thirds of a class will come from within about 60 miles or so of our location in Roslyn, and the other third can come from really kind of anywhere across the United States. We've had folks who come from outside the United States. I think the furthest away is Fiji, Indonesia, but typical executive MBA class probably have somewhere between 13 to 15 states of residency represented. So you got Sean in Philadelphia, Jimmy, who you hear from momentarily, is down in Arkansas. So we do have travelers in this program, and I think the hybrid structure combined with the weekend residency really makes it possible. So Jimmy, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, you bet. So thanks for having me, number one. You can probably tell very quickly from my accent, I'm not from Philadelphia. Wish I could say I was from Fiji, but that's not working out yet either. So actually coming from Central Arkansas, so I fly back and forth for the program. I live here in Central Arkansas, born and raised. My background is insurance and healthcare services. Really have spent my entire career in that space. And so found myself along my career journey looking for an opportunity to continue to grow and develop. And through a lot of twists and turns, found myself at Darden, and I'm having a blast. I am like Sean, bittersweet. I'm going to enjoy not reading cases every weekend. But I am going to deeply, deeply miss spending weekends with my classmates. So it's very bittersweet coming close to the end. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, this point in the program tends to be a real swirl of emotions for folks, right? You're excited for what's to come, and obviously this is also a time when people tend to get some career news, right? If they're looking to make a transition, this is typically when some of that starts to happen. But also, you won't be in this with this group of people together in the same kind of way. And so, LR2, the second week-long leadership residency down in Charlottesville, is a real fun week for that reason. It's kind of last chance to dance, so to speak. Let's talk about global residencies real quick, because y'all are at a point where you've had a chance to travel and participate in these, and it's a really cool part of the program. It's interestingly enough, the Executive MBA program is the only format of the Darden MBA that requires a global course. Part-time MBA students, full-time MBA students, it's elective experience, but it's been a required part of the Executive MBA program from its inception. So Sean, can you tell us a little bit about the global residency or residencies you participated in and what you did?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I ended up doing one global residency. I was very tempted after it was done to sign up for a second one, but ended up not being able to fit with my schedule. But I went to South Korea. So we went to two cities there. First, we started in Seoul. We spent roughly half the time in each, so about half the time in Seoul and then half the time in Busan. It was an incredible experience. We got to hear from a number of business and community leaders, kind of throughout the country that I would have otherwise not had access to, like outside of the program. And so it's great to hear their perspective, being able to understand some of the similarities in the business world there compared to here in the States, as well as some of the differences, and be able to compare and contrast. And then also it was a great opportunity to kind of further bond with your fellow cohort and classmates, because everyone's obviously there in a new country for roughly a week. It's a great opportunity to really kind of get close and get to know people in the class even better.
Yeah, there's something special when you go so far away, right? The time zone's really significant in terms of a difference, and you're just there. Like it's hard to keep track of things. You're kind of just with a group. It's an awesome part about the global residency. You have this opportunity, sort of a 7-day period to really bond. Jimmy, how about you? Tell us about your global residency or residencies you participate in.
But so so Brett mentioned earlier you can choose to do more. So I chose to do three. So I did almost enough to get the GIMBA designation, but not quite. And I really did it for a couple of different reasons. So like I said earlier, I'm born and raised here in Arkansas. I grew up in a very small town. And honestly, before this program, the only international travel that I'd ever done in my entire life was a trip to Mexico one time. And it was this opportunity for me to really get to see parts of the world that I never have, and who knows, might not ever get the chance to again. And so I thought I would only do one. I did Germany. I had such a wonderful experience that I came back and signed up for two more. So I also did Finland and Estonia. That's one GR that's combines both of those visits, and then just got back from Vietnam last week. I'm still fighting a little bit of a cold. You can tell I'm recovering from the travel, but getting to see multiple places, it was really interesting to compare and contrast the experiences. They were each unique in their own way, but there were a lot of similarities too. The opportunity to learn more about the local culture within each of these areas, as well as that's both personal culture and business culture. And you start to realize that while we're a global economy and a global society, we also have very different worlds that we operate in. And so getting to talk to business leaders that are doing business and understanding where there are overlaps, but then where there are things that are very unique, was just fascinating. And so that you learn some things that you want to try to bring back home. You learn some things that you're glad aren't here, and so I really, really, from I would say, overall helping me round out as a human being, the experiences have been really life changing. They've kind of changed my perspective on a lot of things far beyond my career and the work that I do. And so, been a lot of fun. Other than the jet lag, I could do without that, but other than that, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the benefit of going on more than one global residency is that comparative view between locations. And for folks who are curious, you apply to our executive MBA program. You don't apply to a particular format. If you're either IMBA or GIMBA, there is a question on the application where you can say what you're interested in at the time of application, but it's not binding in any way. And if you're admitted, you'll be given your choice of formats. And so the time of accepting your offer that you choose, whether you'd like to be an IMBA or a GIMBA student, is possible to shift around till probably early July or so when we announce the global residency locations. Now, even after you start, right, you can begin as an IMBA student, and to Jimmy's point, right, if you do 4 global residencies, you can become a GIMBA format student, earn that designation. You can also start as a GIMBA student, and if you find that you can't do 4 global residencies, you can always shift to IMBA, and that happens. So I think sometimes people look at these things and they think, oh man, am I really locked in? There's actually more fluidity than you might think. And if you come for a class visit, which I would certainly encourage you to do, you won't know who's an IMBA or a GIMBA student unless you stop them and ask them. And everybody's part of the same class, all moving through the program together, which I think is one of the unique things about our program. Sometimes when you look at other schools, these two formats, like the global program and the IMBA program, are very different. Here, it's very integrated. Everybody's part of the same class. So, Gabby, how about you? Tell us about your global residency experience.
So, I went to Morocco. Kind of unlike Jimmy, I'm a huge traveler. I love traveling. It was actually my opportunity. I kind of took it as an opportunity to finally get to visit the continent of Africa for the first time. And I mean, to echo them both, I mean, the experience was incredible. I think one thing that I really wanted to highlight about how Darden does these global residencies is that they do such a wonderful job of it still being focused on what we're there for as, MBA students, right? Getting to know the businesses, doing work, right? Brett actually mentioned earlier that you do have like usually some kind of final paper or something to put together at the end to kind of just sum up everything you've experienced and everything you've been learning and stuff. But you, each day, they really do a wonderful job of like, okay, in the morning you'll meet with, X number of organizations or companies, and then have some really incredible experience to share together, whether it's like a meal or something special to that country. And then they give you time to actually, go explore on your own or as a group. So just it's a great way to, you're really getting an opportunity to experience the country with your classmates. And it is, that was probably one of my favorite things about it, was just, I was really learning from as an MBA student, but just also culturally and as a person, I was learning a lot too. So
Yeah, and you have probably two structured meals as part of the kind of the very beginning at the very end of the global residency. The rest of the evenings are kind of on your own, which you have time to explore. And my sense is that the students do a good job of scheduling their own fun during that period. So let's talk a little bit about the second year. As promised, I did want to take some time out for the global residency conversation because that's not something we talked about in the previous session as much. So Jimmy, I want to come to you first. What's been your favorite thing about the second year of the program?
For me, it's been the flexibility, so being able to choose both the content of the classes that I want to pursue as well as the schedule, my professional schedule actually shifted a little bit towards the latter part of last year. And so being able to choose electives based on what I thought I might need to do to keep up with work and keep up with my home life, I've really enjoyed that. And I also feel like being able to pick the topic of the class, you find that you tend to be a little more into it because you're like, I chose this class for a reason. It means a lot to me versus maybe in a normal quarter, two classes you may be really into, but maybe accounting two, that's not your thing, but you got to get through it. And so I've really enjoyed that part too. It seems like my energy level's been up a little bit because it's like all three classes or something that I'm super interested in. And then the scheduling, the being able to sort of flex around my schedule has been very helpful.
Yeah, it's worth noting the core classes are what they are. We always get this question. It's set for you. You don't register for those classes. You're just automatically enrolled in those classes. We always get the question from incoming students about when do I choose my classes? When do I register for classes? And it's like, well, the first year you're really not going to do that because you are in the core curriculum. But when you start getting to that elective conversation, that's when you'll be able to pick your classes. And to your point, Jimmy, I hear that from a lot of students. Gabby, how about for you? What have you enjoyed the most about second year?
Very similar, the flexibility, the opportunity to kind of focus on in areas in which that, either where I either feel that I'm strong or even in a lot of cases, I know a lot of students are choosing classes based off of where they want to actually develop themselves further. So that's really nice. I think another thing I've really enjoyed is having more opportunities to meet more of the professors. The faculty at Darden is incredible, and getting to take, different courses that relate to your to your core classes, but getting to meet other professors in those specialties and fields has been a really like fun opportunity for me at least.
Yeah, it's a great group of faculty who teach in the electives. Electives, it's in the core is always taught by full-time Darden faculty. So by that we mean people who are full professors at Darden. Electives can be taught by a broader set of faculty, certainly inclusive of those professors at Darden, but occasionally adjunct faculty, professors of practice, that kind of thing. So you get to meet all kinds of great people, and it's a real strong lineup. It's amazing to see the classes that people get to take. There's typically somewhere in the neighborhood, if you're curious, about 10 electives offered per elective quarter to executive MBA students. So you have probably some number of like 40 electives total to choose from if on the executive MBA schedule. And then you also, depending upon how much flexibility you have and where you're based, you could also look at the part-time MBA electives. And there's typically about 3 to 4 part-time MBA electives offered per part-time MBA quarter, and they follow the evening weeknight schedule. So if you add all that up and you think about like how many electives you could choose from, it's probably a little bit of redundancy between those lists, but maybe close to 50 electives total for 12 electives. That's quite a bit of choice. So Sean, I want to come to you next. What's been your favorite thing about second year?
Definitely agree with what's already been said. The only thing that I would add is maybe not in every elective class, but in a lot of elective classes, it's often that they'll bring in more kind of expertise, and you kind of hear from actual practitioners in the field, which has been fun. There's been a number of courses where maybe the professor knows someone who's a leader in the space that they're teaching, in the actual industry, and they'll come in and speak to the class. And so I've really enjoyed those electives where you kind of get that opportunity.
Can you tell us about one of the classes in particular?
Yeah, sure. So one class I took last quarter was leading in uncertainty in crisis with Vivian Reifberg, who I believe she's considered a professor in practice. So she has like a ton of industry experience, but then she also brought in several different kind of senior executives, either CEOs or generally people in the C-suite who have gone through a crisis in the past, and they'd almost basically do a case about, a crisis that their company went through, how they handled it, what decisions they made, and what things they would do differently if they could go back. So it was like super helpful to kind of go through the case of what I think would make sense and kind of what the class thinks makes sense, and then hear from the actual person who went through it and kind of compare there.
Great. Yeah, that class has gotten more and more popular. I think she had almost 60 people registered for it. And I see we got a question about all the potential focus areas. So I'll just read these out for folks just so you have them. And I will say, if you want to refer to the potential electives that have been offered in the past, the focus areas, they're all listed out on the electives page on our website. So it's a good resource if you want to sort of follow along as we talk about things here. So data analytics and technology, entrepreneurship, ESG, and social impact. That's one. Finance, leadership, marketing, and strategy. And see, Jimmy, you got it already. That's awesome. See, these are my kind of panelists, right? Doing my work for me. Thank you. So let's talk about your kind of favorite elective, and then I may even ask you about your favorite core class too, since accounting 2 has already been mentioned here as maybe not the highlight for at least one of our panels. So maybe more than one of our panels. So Gabby, I'm going to come to you first for this. What's been your favorite elective that you've taken?
Ooh, okay. What have I taken? Sometimes it feels like everything's a little bit of a blur. Uh, I'm actually going to say negotiations. As somebody who doesn't really get an opportunity to do something like that very often, or also is like a horrible haggler in the real world. It was the class was kind of to Sean's point, like the class was really focused on, not only learning from experts, but it was also just doing negotiations in a number of different circumstances, which once again, as an active duty member, like do not have a lot of opportunity for. So it was a way for me to get out of my comfort zone and work on, speaking and having those kind of hard conversations in a lot of different ways. So I enjoyed kind of pushing myself there.
Yeah, and your point earlier about people kind of challenging themselves and sort of maybe taking electives that it may be not as natural for them and they feel like are going to be harder for them for a variety of reasons. I hear that from a lot of students too. And negotiations is a very popular elective, one that's perennially sold out. Very, very popular across both full-time, part-time, and executive MBA. Sean, how about for you? What's your favorite elective?
Yeah, so that leading uncertainty crisis is definitely up there, but I think the other one I would mention is there's a course called behavioral decision making. And so that course really kind of helps frame kind of these are the common scenarios and where kind of your human intuition and what you think is the right decision and what the actual data tells you is the right decision or a more objective look, where those things kind of don't line up and kind of how you can tell when those situations might happen and then what potentially you should do about it. So it's really interesting. I never really thought about it that much before, but it's already kind of influenced the way I make certain decisions. So I really enjoyed that class. Recommend it.
All right, Jimmy, how about you? Favorite elective?
So this was a tough one for me. I knew you were going to ask this, so I was thinking about it before class. Entrepreneurship through acquisition, I loved. CEO leadership in the 21st century, I loved, mostly because both of those speak to my heart because I've always wanted to either own and or run my own company. I want to be a CEO one day. I'm not bashful about that. And so I really thought those would win out. Top of the list for me, though, it was actually an easy winner, was disruptive strategy. I loved that class. The notion of trying to take this sort of very nebulous concept, which is how do you innovate and try to disrupt existing markets in sort of the 21st century and do it in a way that's systematic and more methodical rather than I sure hope I come up with a great idea and maybe it will work, you know? And so the whole class, the whole thesis of the class was there are systematic ways to sort of work through and wrestle with that problem. And you actually don't have to be outside of an industry to do it. And so, as someone who's currently working in a very well established market today, this notion of, hey, I can be disruptive and innovative within a well established company, within a well established market, it was a lot of fun, you know, and so I enjoyed that a lot. So I think that was number one for me.
Well, thank you all for that. I always have a little bit of course envy when people start describing the courses that they've been able to take here and just incredible things they've been able to learn about. I will mention we got a question here in the chat about alumni permitted to audit classes. So at Darden, that's not really a thing. A lot of that has to do with the case method and the learning experience here, but also it has to do with sort of feedback that we've gotten from alums about what they are interested in and what they'd like to see more of. So I'm going to share here some information that you can find on our alumni site about the benefits that are available to alumni. And I will say the alumni have really asked the school to put more resources around alumni career services. So you may know, obviously, you have career support while you're a student here across all of our programs. We actually have a dedicated team of people who support our executive MBA students. They also work closely with our part-time MBA students. But after you graduate, all Darden alums also have access to alumni career services, complimentary for life. And they do virtual meetings. They travel around the country. They meet with folks. They do leadership coaching, all kinds of stuff. And that's really from our alumni's perspective, at least, where they've asked the school to put resources. And so less kind of on the class auditing piece. But again, I think it's also pedagogical. You know, the case method makes most sense if you're participating, and it's not really the sort of thing you just sit in the back of the classroom and observe. And so hopefully that makes some sense. And it's also worth noting our current students, the way the classes are structured, about 35 to 40% of your grade as a current student is going to come from class participation. The other portion is likely from exams. And so we want to keep that airtime for the students since they're being evaluated in that way. So let's talk. I didn't put this in the. You have to bear with me here. I did not put this in the advanced questions, but neither I didn't put the global residency question in the advanced questions either. So we're fully off script here. So let's talk a little bit about core curriculum. I want to just dip back into the first year just for a little bit. Sean, did you have a favorite class from the core? Something that you really enjoyed?
It's a tough one. I enjoyed a lot of the classes in the core. I would say for me, this might not be a popular answer. I actually really enjoyed FMP one, which is financial management and policies. I didn't have a business like undergrad experience, so to uh, understand how companies make financial decisions and like some of the like basic kind of underlying principles that influence that, it was helpful for me to like better understand like the companies I work at and the decisions that they make. So yeah, I would say that for me is one that stood out.
Yeah, in finance, that's the finance core class. It's divided into part one and part two, which is true about most of the classes you'll take in core. There's just a few classes that only have a single class. So leadership communication is one of them. Business ethics and strategy are the other two. So it's three classes that only have one. The other courses have part one and part two. So Jimmy, how about for you? Do you have a favorite core class?
Dude, almost sounds like such a nerd. It was econ too. So I'm a finance undergrad. I did finance straight out of school, and so I tend to be kind of drawn to numbers. You know, like numbers and spreadsheets are my safe space. And I always kind of struggled with econ in undergrad, and so it was really fascinating for me to go back through the experience of learning econ now. I'm 20 years removed, I'm dating myself, 20 years removed from undergrad, at how much more relevant the material was for me, you know, because you were dealing with national markets. You were trying to understand how social issues and political issues all play a role in sort of structuring and driving the way that our economies operate today. And as an adult, with these experiences under my belt, I got so much more from it. And I found myself, going into it, I was like, oh, it's econ. I was terrible at econ. What am I gonna do? And I ended up loving it. I had the best time in econ. And so that was I don't know that I don't know if I learned a lot or not, but I had a good time. So I call it a win.
I think you probably learned a bunch. And for those of you who were on for the virtual mock class with Dan Murphy, who typically teaches the first part of econ in our executive MBA program, he shared a little bit about how the school kind of thinks about economics. So for many of you, you may be thinking about micro and macro. So micro is distributed across all of the different courses, right? You're not going to have just a micro course here. You're going to get microeconomics in your finance class, your accounting class. It's going to come up in a lot of different ways. Your econ classes as part of the core curriculum are really going to focus more on macro concepts and principles. And I think the faculty do a great job. Again, if you join us for the virtual mock class, Dan has an incredible way of sort of breaking it down and making things very sort of simple and sort of conceptualizing it with students. And that's true about the faculty generally here. That you wouldn't be at Darden as a faculty member if you were not serious about teaching and engaging with students, and if you didn't have a lot of prowess in the classroom. So, Gabby, how about for you? What was your favorite core class?
Well, you touched on it. It was Gem 1 and Gem 2 as well. I mean, I my undergrad was in engineering, so completely beyond, anything I've done recently. But for me too, I think it was just the idea of having I don't know, a more like developing a more well-informed way to kind of view the world and what's going on in it, right? When we look at our current political landscape and, the just the interconnectivity between, what's going on in major, in big company, excuse me, in big countries like the US and China and stuff, and how that affects, developing countries and stuff, and how we all are so intermixed now with technology, and how one little thing someplace can, make huge waves elsewhere. I just really appreciated the perspective it provided that course provided me, in understanding, kind of not only the US's place, but in Gem 2, you really focus on other countries, and stuff. And it really, I think, ties to what we're doing in those global residencies and kind of just bringing the whole bigger picture together. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, those are the econ courses in particular are courses that you hear people say they understand the news differently now. Like when they read the Wall Street Journal or New York Times, or hear an economic story, Jay Powell talking about interest rates. You just have a very different perspective about that than you did before you started the program. So Jimmy, coming back to the second year, thank you for a little bit of a digression into the first year, but come back to the second year. How did you think about the electives that you were taking? You mentioned you really enjoyed choosing your classes, and that's been energizing for you. But how did you think about what courses you wanted to take?
So for me, and I've talked to some of my classmates, it seems like we all kind of did this different ways. So I'd be curious to hear others' answers. But for mine, I very, very, very selfishly focused on subject matter that I thought would help me in my sort of future career path. So I have the luxury of having a sense of what I'm going to be working on for the next few years. And so it gave me this really kind of grounded way to say, where are some places that I should spend some energy and some time trying to learn more? And so I think Gabby mentioned this earlier. I really tried to focus in on areas where I felt like I didn't have experience, and then use that to choose my classes. I didn't necessarily focus on a focus area. Interestingly enough, after I picked electives, I think I qualified for like two or something, so it worked out. But that wasn't my sort of driving factor. And so I just kind of zoomed out. I looked at all the classes, and then I asked myself, where are the places that I think I need the most work or the most remedial training, so to speak, and chose from that. So a lot of strategy, a lot of general leadership classes, things of that nature. I focused also very much on staying away from the classes that felt like I was going to be able to use a spreadsheet, because I know me, and I'm like, that's where I'll go. I'll go to that finance class that's spreadsheet heavy because I love that stuff. And I thought, no, you gotta try to challenge yourself, buddy. And so I've successfully navigated electives without using spreadsheets very much. So that was another, I think, critical factor.
I appreciate that. It's funny to hear your point about focus areas. I do the Experience Started podcast where we talk with full-time MBA students as well. And full-time MBA students have the opportunity to take 24 electives, right? Electives start at the end of their first year, continue into the second year. And almost to a person. I hear very few students who are like, "Oh yeah, I wanted to make sure I earned this concentration. I really want to make sure I had that." It's really more they're just picking classes, and then when they get to the end of it, they realize, "Oh, well, I've earned like these two or three different concentrations sort of back their way into it, not necessarily the guiding thing that led them to choose their courses." It's interesting to me because we get so many questions from prospective students about it, but it makes sense that the folks who choose Darden, given you go through this very broad core, that you kind of can continue to stay broad even through the electives. Gabby, how did you think about choosing your electives? What was your approach?
It wasn't actually that much different than Jimmy's. So, um, for me, I'm what, we term here as like a climber, right? I'm planning on staying in the military and continuing my service. And so knowing that I personally really, I didn't necessarily focus on focus areas, but leadership and strategy were big proponent, were very much what I was going for. Just knowing what my future career progression was going to look like. But to that point too, I did want to develop myself in areas where I knew I was going to be, I was going to need some work. So, like I said, I took negotiations. I really wanted to work off of the learning I did in GEM, and I took sustainable global value chains. And right now, I'm just starting storytelling with data because, once again, with the incorporation of AI and especially a lot of what was getting discussed during our class, during our classes, I realized that I really need to, step a little bit further into some of that spreadsheet work that that Jimmy was talking about, as much as I'm not a huge fan of it personally. So it was, like I said, some focus, but then kind of finding those onesie twosies courses where with the timing and stuff, if I could take it to once again challenge myself and kind of expand my repertoire a little bit before finishing my time here, then I really wanted to make sure I took advantage of that.
Thank you, Gabby. How about you, Sean? What was your approach?
Yeah, so I feel like I um kind of tried to blend a few things. So one, like, part of me was just like look for courses that I think are like really interesting or exciting to me, even if they didn't necessarily fully align with the career objective, but just like I would love to learn it. So there's a piece for that. There was a piece that I felt like was more directly kind of this directly ties to my career and can kind of help get to where I want to go. And then there were other things that were like kind of how, like, where do I need to kind of be rounded out in general as I think about like my current skill set and abilities. Um, so those are kind of the three things I thought about. And so it's like I ended up taking like a lot of, I think I ended up qualifying for a lot of the focus areas because I was kind of uh, like some classes I would take because I was like super interested in like the topic. And a lot of those ended up actually being some of the like spreadsheet stuff too. I can also be a little bit of a spreadsheet person. And then there are other classes that are like more directly tied to my field, and then there are also some like I feel like I need to round out a little bit more in the leadership piece. And so then there are some courses I took there. So I ended up getting like I think maybe four of the focus areas. So I was kind of a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, we get that question. Can you earn more than one? The answer is yes. You can. I want to talk about schedule and time. We've already talked a little bit about the flexibility that students have in the second year, and you have a little bit more control over your schedule. So, Gabby, I want to come to you first for this question. How did you manage, work and life and school? How'd that look in the first year versus maybe the second year?
Oh, the first year, I relied very heavily on my learning team. They were a huge proponent of my success, I think, in getting through through all the core classes. Darden will break you into these teams that are typically mixed of a group of people with a wide variety of experience and backgrounds so that you can rely on one another to kind of figure out, if you're in a class that maybe you're struggling a little bit with, you typically have somebody within your team who can hopefully help, who should be able to help you. That was huge for me. I mean, especially with reading, we have, I think on a given OGR weekend, you have almost, I think, 16 or so cases that you're prepping for the weekend. So being able to divvy that and work with the team to kind of talk through that was huge. Coming into core classes where you don't really have that safety net anymore and you're kind of all split amongst all the different courses going on. I think, one, we talked about how the electives, it's a little less, oh, we need to get, hit certain numbers or get a very specific, it's not exactly about what the final is going to be specifically, right? It's really about the experience and the learning that you're getting out of that class. So the intensity's has racked down a little bit with electives. And so that's kind of helped a lot. But I really think, the big thing has been, honestly, just, gosh, I think it's just prioritizing, right? I mean, that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we're all learning through this whole experience together, right? If you set aside your, I have my certain times that I work on it, and then I have my times that I don't. But sorry, I should have thought about this a little bit more. But it's just, it doesn't change the fact though that I think actually, sorry, the main thing I'm going to say is that after working, with a certain team and stuff going forward, you get this whole year together to get to learn and meet new people and stuff. So when you get into these new electives, you already know everybody. So, you've still got people that you can rely on, still people that you can work with. You do a lot more like group projects and stuff in the electives too. So you just get more of that integration piece, and that focus there, I think, really helps, instead of it being like, oh, I need to get my spreadsheet together in order to do this 5-hour exam. It's just a lot more collaborative, I think, across the board, and that just continues to build over time. Right.
It's all good. I will say, just as somebody who's on the outside of the experience, your first year and second year, I think it's a little bit, maybe also to Jimmy's point earlier, like you're picking your classes, right? You have more control here. I just think that feels a little bit different to students as well. And so the energy, they both, obviously both great parts of the program, but the energy feels a little different in second year than first year. I think I do feel that like more laid back thing from folks. And also, again, you've been in the program by that point, at least for a year, if not longer, and you kind of figured out how to make all this work. And so it's less of that, when you first get into the program, you're like trying to figure everything out. First 4 to 6 months, probably experimentation about schedule and how to manage all this. And so that's a lot. And you're not feeling that in the second year, I think, as much. Sean, how about you? What's been your approach to sort of time management, sort of making all this work, and how's that varied from first year to second year?
No, definitely like agree with some of your comments. I feel like with more in the first year, it's like it can be a little bit overwhelming to start because there's like so much. It's like the cases are decently long sometimes, and then you get a lot of them, especially for like an OGR weekend when you're there in person. So there's definitely like a lot of relying on your learning team and trying to figure out, kind of what's the best way to kind of tackle everything. I think as you move to your electives, at least for me, I felt one, I could kind of like read cases a little bit more efficiently, if that makes sense. And kind of, I felt like I didn't need quite as much time to prepare for each course because I kind of knew a little bit kind of more about how the case study works, like what are kind of things to expect. And then, like, I also agree, like, these are things I signed up for. So I'm generally like actually kind of excited to kind of like get into the work of figuring it out for pretty much all of the classes, which is like a nice energy. And then honestly, for me, like, like in an executive format, like we're all working in general, like grades didn't necessarily have a big focus for me like throughout, but especially as I got to electives, it became even less of a focus for me. It was like more about like trying to get as much learning as possible and less focused on like trying to hit a certain, grade or something in the course.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big shifts when you come back as an adult learner, right? It's more learning oriented, it's less grade outcome oriented. And I think that's something important to kind of keep in mind. I think it's important, particularly if you come to this program, like many of our students, without background in a lot of these topics. I think keeping the focus on like where you start to where you end. What did you know about accounting before you started that class? What did you learn about it over the course of the class? And kind of keeping that as the focus, less focused on like what grade did I get here? Because that's, I mean, a grade is not going to reflect necessarily all the time exactly what you've learned and what you're going to be able to apply out of the class. And I do think that's one of the differences coming to school as an adult learner. So Jimmy, how about you? How have you managed the sort of time component, the schedule component of all this
Brett,
first year, second year?
your question assumes that I have. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think I did a couple things. One, I tried to stay true to the things that worked for me in core. And so there were like these things that I worked out through the first year that I found really helped me. So examples of that, since I fly back and forth, I started to travel a day early, and then I would commit a day of prep before OGR. And so I knew I could park work there. That helped. I do prep on Sundays. That worked. And so with electives, the way that showed up was one thing I did was I tried as much as I could to actively avoid any of the elective classes that were online only. There's a small selection that you can choose from that are basically fully remote. And I just knew that's not good for me. That's not good for my schedule. I do better being on grounds with my classmates. I tend to study better and I learn better. And so I tried to focus on classes that would stay as close to that same sort of cadence and frequency that I had in year one. Because I'm used to it. It's working. I don't have to change a lot. And so that worked out really well. I did have to deviate once because there was a class I just really wanted to take, and so I had to deviate from that. But that worked a lot. And then outside of that, I spend a lot of time on the front end. Like for example, quarter 10 just recently opened up, and so I sit down and I set up my OneNote for every single class. I download all the cases. I print them into OneNote. I prep everything, and so I know now I don't have to spend any energy through the rest of the quarter on logistical issues or things of that nature. All I have to do is focus my time on reading, and everything is there. Fair warning, a professor may change the material at some point, and you just need to be sure that you're keeping an eye on that, because sometimes they'll swap an article and you're like, I didn't read this. And you realize because you downloaded it at the beginning and by the time you got to class, it was different. So fair warning, watch for that. But that works really well for me. So I think staying true to the schedule, it worked. And then I spend a lot of front end time prepping everything so that through the quarter, all I have to worry about is reading. And that helps me a lot too.
All right, two more questions for y'all. Sean, I'll come to you first with this next question. What's been the most surprising thing about the Executive MBA program for you?
Uh, I guess with the executive format, I was like not quite sure I would get as fully out of, was as opposed to a full-time program, was like, am I going to really, be able to build meaningful relationships and kind of have that kind of network and community that I wanted to get out of an MBA. And like I've been like pleasantly surprised about kind of, being able to really get to know and kind of enjoy being with kind of our cohort. The kind of on grounds, like they're like pretty much, especially in core, like everyone's there like from Friday to Sunday. Kind of typically people end up staying at, the same hotel that's provided by the school. And so it was really like that format worked really well for really getting to know people, making friends, building relationships. So that's one. It's not like a full surprise, but like I was a little bit concerned, like, as opposed to a full-time MBA, am I going to be able to get that? And I feel like I really have, which has been awesome.
Yeah, it's a common line of question. People sometimes think that to have that sort of full network experience, relationship experience, you have to do a full-time MBA program. And we certainly have a different perspective on that here at Darden with our executive MBA program and part-time MBA programs. But I think it's important to do your research here, and a good way to kind of get a feel for the culture, the sense of community, is to come for a class visit and see how the students engage with each other. I think that you'd find that it's a pretty tight-knit group of people. So, Jimmy, how about for you? What's been the most surprising thing about your executive MBA
I wasn't
experience?
ready. So my answer is usually similar to Sean's, because I do think I did not expect to develop the relationships that I have. And I'm not going to talk about it because I get emotional now every time I talk about this because it's coming to an end. So I'm going to switch my answer. I think the other thing that I would add is I did not expect the professors to treat us like peers and colleagues so much. When I was in high school or undergrad, and it's probably because I was so young that, our professors, they were older, they were more experienced. And so I felt like I was being taught by a parent or a guardian and you kind of felt that dynamic. And in the executive program, it's not been that way. Like our professors, they talk to us like we're their equals. You feel like you're talking to a coworker or a peer, and that's been pretty cool. It's like it's no different than how I interact with my coworkers back in the office, and so I've really enjoyed that dynamic of the relationship. I think it's made learning a lot easier because you don't feel like you're being taught from above. You feel like you're being taught by somebody that's sitting right beside you that can relate to you and you can relate to them. And that part's been pretty cool. I didn't really expect that.
Gabby, how about you? What's been the most surprising thing?
I think for me, it was probably really like the focus that Darden has on really trying to develop us professionally as well. The experiential learning courses that are kind of that we take throughout our core class and into our first semester of electives. Just the opportunity and like just the breadth of sorry, I can't think of the word all of a sudden, but of like what Darden offers in regards to, the counseling, the all the panels, the connections that they open, the alumni and stuff. I didn't realize how much of a focus there was going to be from the faculty and from everyone on board in helping to develop you in whatever way that you were looking to, whether, you're a climber or if you're changing into a new thing, or if you're trying to pursue entrepreneurship and stuff. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, there's a total of 7.5 credits focused on career and professional development. We talked about the professional advancement course, which is 1.5 credits, but there's another 4 experiential learning courses that run across in quarters 4, 5, and then 7, 8, I believe. And that is all career and professional development related. And so you have 7.5 credits of your program. It's a 60 credit program, so it's not an insignificant amount that's focused on you and developing you professionally and from a career standpoint. All right, let's do the last question, lightning round here. Final piece of advice for our prospective students who were on the call today. Jimmy, piece of advice for our listeners?
Sorry, I thought I muted. Yeah, I think what I would say is be very thoughtful coming into it on what your support network is going to look like. It's been stated over and over. It's a lot of time commitment. You're going to want to really be able to apply yourself. And the reality is it takes more than you to be successful in navigating the program. And so I think try to be thoughtful about the places where you're going to need support, you're going to need help, and establish that on the front end. An example of that is me with my family. We had a discussion when I started, and I said, I think this is how this is going to be different. I think this is what this is going to mean. I think this is how it's going to affect us. And so we didn't go into it thinking Jimmy just has this new project that he's doing, but life will be the same. And so my family was very supportive, but we were very intentional about how we did that. And so I would say just give that some thought and ask yourself what will need to look different for me to be successful here, and then try to apply that early on.
Yeah, I love that. Have those conversations early and often. Keep having those conversations as you go through the program. Yeah, Abby, how about for you? Piece of advice?
Get integrated. I mean, between integrated into your cohort, integrated into everything Darden is providing. Every time you guys meet up on OGR weekends, there's so many different activities and things going on. And it's easy, you're tired, you were reading a bunch of cases, you were doing all this work to get to that OGR weekend, you're in class for several hours, but when they have the panels on Friday night, go to the panel. When when your cohort is setting stuff up, you don't have to go for the whole thing, but attend. The people and the experiences you're going to get out of this are just so enriching, and the connections you're going to make, kind of to Jimmy's point earlier, are probably one of the biggest, or one of the most rewarding parts of your experience. So just be involved, get integrated.
Yeah, for those of you who are curious, there's what's called Friday Night Live. It's typically a speaker series, panel conversation series that happens on the Fridays of a weekend residency. It's open to honestly part-time MBA as well as MSBA students, but it coincides with an executive MBA residency. And these are kind of put together by students. Honestly, they help coordinate a lot of the programming. So if you go, you're also supporting your classmates. So Sean, you get the last word here. Piece of advice for our attendees.
Yeah, sure. I would say somewhat kind of building off of the like getting involved. I would say, um, like definitely, keep an open mind. At least for me, coming into the MBA, I kind of had a very specific view of like where I wanted to go and like what I wanted to do while I was there. But I felt like, I tried to make sure I kept an open mind in the beginning, and I was able to explore and learn a lot more about myself, what my interests are, both personally and professionally, kind of through getting involved in different things that I may have initially not thought of. So I would say, yeah, definitely like try and keep an open mind. I think it's good to have an idea of where you want to go, but it's also good to kind of take a step back and look at, reflect and kind of look at all the opportunities that are available to you.
A good place to stop. Well, Gabby, Sean, Jimmy, thank you so much for being here. And to our attendees, thank you so much for joining for tonight's session. As always, we were recording the conversation. We'll plan to share out a link to the recording if you want to go back and review any part of the conversation. If you're wondering about next steps, we do have some class visits upcoming. Next Executive MBA class visit will be on Saturday, the 22nd of March. Have an opportunity to come join the students for class observation and then have lunch, which is pretty full 2.5 hours. You get a lot of information about the program in a relatively short period of time. We also have tours. If you just want to see our space in Roslyn, come by. We'd love to have you join us on a Thursday evening or a Friday morning for one of those. But hopefully we'll see you again soon. And please do not hesitate to reach out if we can be of assistance anyway. So thank you all and have a good night. And that was a conversation with current Executive MBA students here at the Darden School of Business, reflecting upon the second year or the elective period of the Executive MBA program. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.